When I signed those hospital discharge papers with trembling hands, I had no idea I was being released into a life that no longer belonged to me. The nurse wheeled me to the entrance, chattering about follow-up appointments and medication schedules. But all I could think about was sleeping in my own bed after 3 weeks of fluorescent lights and beeping machines. My husband Robert was supposed to pick me up at 2 o'clock. It was now 4:30, and my phone had gone straight to voicemail 7 times. That's when I called my neighbor Patricia, and she said the words that would shatter everything. "Me, honey, there are people moving furniture out of your house. Big trucks, I thought you knew." My name is Me, and this is a story about how the man I loved for 32 years sold our home, the house where I raised our children, celebrated every holiday, planted every rosebush in the garden, while I was lying in a hospital bed, recovering from emergency surgery. But more than that, it's a story about what happens when you underestimate a woman who has spent her entire life being kind, accommodating, and silent. Let me take you back to where this all started, because the betrayal was deeper than anyone could have imagined, and the justice. Well, the justice was sweeter than I ever thought possible. Before I tell you about the worst month of my life, I need you to understand what my life was before. I need you to see what I had, so you'll understand what I lost, and what I fought to reclaim. Robert and I bought our house in 1991, 3 months after our wedding. It wasn't much back then, a modest two-story colonial with faded blue shutters and a lawn full of dandelions. But it was ours. I remember standing in the empty living room on moving day, sunlight streaming through the bare windows, and Robert spinning me around in a circle, both of us laughing like teenagers. "This is where we'll grow old together, Me," he said. "This is forever." I believed him. Over 30 years, I poured my heart into that house. I hand-stenciled the border in the kitchen, refinished every piece of wooden furniture in the basement during cold winters, spent countless weekends on my knees planting tulip bulbs and pruning hydrangeas. Our son Marcus took his first steps on that living room carpet. Our daughter Bethany had prom pictures taken on the front porch. When my mother was dying, she spent her final 3 months in our guest bedroom, and I held her hand in that sun-filled room as she took her last breath. That house wasn't just walls and a roof. It was every memory, every milestone, every moment that mattered. Robert worked in sales, medical equipment, pharmaceutical supplies, that sort of thing. He traveled often, sometimes 2 weeks out of the month. I didn't mind. I had my substitute teaching job at the elementary school, my garden club, my book group. We had separate checking accounts but joint savings. We had our routines, our comfortable patterns. Looking back now, I can see that we'd become more like roommates than spouses, but at the time, I thought that's what marriage became after 3 decades. Comfortable, predictable, safe. I should have noticed when things started changing 6 months before my surgery. Robert became secretive about his phone, taking calls in the garage or stepping outside when it rang. He started dressing better for work, new cologne, expensive shirts I didn't remember buying. When I asked about it, he said his company was pushing for a more professional image. He seemed distracted during dinner, constantly checking his watch. "Are you okay?" I asked him one evening in March. We were eating the pot roast I'd made, his favorite meal, and he'd barely touched it. "Fine, Me, just work stress," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Big changes coming in the territory assignments." I reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "Whatever happens, we'll handle it together." He pulled his hand away to reach for his water glass. "Sure," he said, "together." Then came April 23rd, the day everything changed. I was in garden that morning, my hands deep in soil as I planted impatiens along the walkway. It was a perfect spring day, 70 degrees, birds singing, the kind of morning that makes you grateful to be alive. I felt a strange cramping in my lower abdomen, but ignored it. Probably just something I ate. By noon, the pain was unbearable. sharp, stabbing sensations that doubled me over. I called Robert. But his phone went to voicemail. I called again, voicemail. I finally called my neighbor Patricia, who drove me to the emergency room. The doctor's face was serious as she showed me the ultrasound. Images, Mrs. Harrison, you have a large ovarian mass. We need to operate immediately. There are concerning features that suggest cancer, I whispered. We won't know until we get in there, but I want to be prepared for the possibility. I was terrified, not just of the surgery, not just of the word cancer, but of facing this alone. Robert finally called me back at 6 p.m., 3 hours after I'd been admitted. Sorry, I was in meetings all day. What's wrong? I'm having emergency surgery in an hour. I said, my voice shaking. Possible ovarian cancer. Can you come? There was a pause, a long pause. Tonight, I'm 3 hours away in Cincinnati. I've got a huge presentation tomorrow morning. Robert, I might have cancer. Another pause. Okay. Let me see what I can rearrange. I'll try to get there by tomorrow. He didn't make it tomorrow or the next day. He showed up on day 3, stayed for 45 minutes, and then said he had to get back for another important meeting. The surgery was complicated. What they thought would be 2 hours turned into 5. The mass was benign, thank God, but it was wrapped around several organs and required extensive repair work. I woke up in agony, disoriented, alone except for the recovery room nurse who held my hand and called me sweetheart. Recovery was slow. Infection set in on day 5, and they had to keep me on Roman 4 antibiotics. Physical therapy was excruciating. Every step felt like my abdomen was tearing open. The doctors said I'd need at least 3 weeks in the hospital, then several more weeks of limited mobility at home. Robert visited twice during those 3 weeks, twice, each time for less than an hour. He seemed agitated, distracted, constantly checking his phone. He brought me a grocery store bouquet once and a magazine I had no interest in reading. How are you managing at home? I asked during a second visit around day 12. Fine. Everything's under control, he said quickly. Listen, I need to talk to you about something. The housing market is really hot right now, and I've been thinking. Robert, I just had major surgery. Can we talk about this when I'm home? Sure. Of course. He kissed my forehead a dry, perfunctory peck and left. I should have known something was wrong. But I was on pain medication, exhausted and focused entirely on healing. I trusted him. After 32 years of marriage, why wouldn't I? My friend Denise from book club visited me almost every day. She brought home, made chicken soup, updated me on neighborhood gossip, sat with me during the lonely evening hours when the hospital felt especially cold and institutional. Has Robert been by? She asked on day 16, arranging fresh flowers in the vase by my bed. He's so busy with work, I said automatically, the excuse I'd been making for years. You know how it is with his travel schedule. Denise gave me a look I couldn't quite read. Honey, I drove past your house yesterday, and I saw Robert there with a woman. Blonde, younger, very, put together. They were standing in the driveway looking at paperwork. My heart skipped. Probably a colleague. He mentioned someone from the regional office might be helping with some project. Maybe, Denise said slowly. But the way they were standing, it seemed familiar, close. I laughed it off, but her words planted a seed of doubt that grew in the darkness of those long hospital nights. When I tried to call Robert that evening to ask about it casually, he didn't answer. He texted back 2 hours later, in meetings, call you tomorrow. He didn't call tomorrow. Discharge day, April 23rd, exactly 3 weeks after my emergency admission. I was dressed in the loose sweatpants and oversized shirt Denise had brought me, since nothing of my own fit over the healing incisions and swelling. The discharge nurse went through pages of instructions, wound care, medication schedules, warning signs of complications, lifting restrictions. I tried to focus, but all I could think about was my own bed, my own bathroom, My own kitchen where I could make real tea instead of the lukewarm dishwater the hospital served. "Your husband is picking you up," the nurse asked, checking her paperwork. "Yes, he should be here at 2. 2 o'clock came and went. Then 3, then 4. I called Robert's cell phone straight to voicemail. I called again, voicemail." Panic started rising in my chest. Had something happened to him? An accident? Was I about to learn I'd lost my husband the same month I'd fought to survive surgery? At 4:30, I called Patricia. "Patricia, I'm so sorry to bother you, but I can't reach Robert and I need a ride home from the hospital. Would you be able?" "Me." Patricia's voice was strange. "Tight, me, honey. Are you being discharged right now?" "Yes, I've been waiting for Robert, but—" "Don't let them discharge you yet. Give me 15 minutes to get there. I'm coming to talk to you in person." The line went dead. I sat in the wheelchair, still holding my phone, my hands beginning to shake. The nurse noticed. "Mrs. Harrison, are you all right? You look pale." "I don't know," I whispered. Patricia arrived 13 minutes later, breathless and red-faced. She asked the nurse to give us privacy, then pulled a chair close to my wheelchair and took both my hands. "Me, something is very wrong at your house." The world seemed to tilt. "What do you mean?" "There are moving trucks there, big ones. Men are carrying furniture out. Your furniture, your couch, your dining room table, boxes and boxes of things. I thought maybe you decided to move, but then I realized you've been in the hospital and something didn't feel right, so Robert wouldn't. But even as I said it, I knew. The secretive phone calls, the distraction, the woman in the driveway, his absence during my surgery. It all clicked into place like a puzzle I'd been refusing to see. "Patricia, we need to go there right now." Patricia drove 15 miles over the speed limit the entire way, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles were white. I sat in the passenger seat, still in my hospital bracelet, my surgical staples pulling with every turn, my mind spinning in disbelief. Maybe there's an explanation. I kept saying, maybe he's having work done on the house and had to move things out temporarily. Maybe. But when we turned onto Maple Street, my street, the street I'd driven down thousands of times, I saw the truth. A large moving van was backed into my driveway. Men in gray uniforms were carrying my grandmother's antique sideboard down the front steps, the sideboard I'd inherited, refinished, treasured. Behind the moving van was a BMW I didn't recognize, and on my front porch, directing the movers with broad gestures, was Robert. He wasn't alone. A woman stood next to him, late 30s, blonde hair in a sleek ponytail, wearing designer jeans and a cashmere sweater. She had her hand on Robert's arm in a way that wasn't professional, in a way that told a story I didn't want to read. Patricia pulled into the driveway, blocking the moving van. Robert's head snapped up, and I watched his face cycle through expressions: shock, panic, guilt, then something cold settling over his features. I opened the car door, my body screaming in protest, and stood on legs that felt like water. "Robert," my voice came out stronger than I felt. "What is happening?" He walked toward me, hands raised like I was a spooked animal. "Me, you're supposed to be in the hospital. They said you weren't being discharged until tomorrow." "They discharged me today. Now answer my question. What is happening?" The blonde woman stepped forward, and I noticed she was wearing heels that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Hi, you must be me. I'm Amber, Robert's fiancée." The world stopped. "His what?" I heard myself say, though I wasn't sure my lips were moving. Robert shot Amber a furious look, then turned back to me. "Me, let's go inside and talk privately." Inside my house, the house you're apparently emptying while I was recovering from surgery. My voice was rising, and neighbors were starting to appear in windows and doorways. Someone better start explaining right now. Robert glanced at the gathering audience and lowered his voice. "I filed for divorce 6 weeks ago. The papers were served to you at the hospital. I never received any papers, and the house is being sold. Settlement was yesterday. The new owners take possession next week, so we're moving everything out. I couldn't breathe. The words made no sense, like he was speaking a foreign language. You sold our house. Our house, Robert, I'm on the deed. You can't sell without my. He pulled folded papers from his jacket pocket. You signed the agreement, me. Right here, he handed me the papers, and I stared at the signature at the bottom. It looked like my signature, but I'd never seen these documents before in my life. I never signed this, I said. My hands shaking so badly the papers rattled. Robert, I was in the hospital. How could I have? You were on a lot of pain medication, he said, and his voice had taken on a tone I'd never heard before, cold, calculated. The lawyer came to the hospital on day 8. You don't remember, but you signed everything. It's all legal. I remember day 8. I'd been on heavy morphine for the infection, drifting in and out of consciousness, but I would remember signing away my house, wouldn't I? Patricia stepped forward. Me was barely conscious on day 8. I was there. This is fraud. Robert smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. No, it's legal. I have witnesses, the lawyer and his assistant both signed affidavits saying me was lucid and understood what she was signing. And before you ask, yes, me, I have power of attorney for medical decisions, which extended to financial decisions related to your care. This is all above board. Financial decisions related to my care, I repeated. Selling our house isn't. The medical bills are astronomical, me. The insurance only covered 70%. Someone had to make hard decisions while you were incapacitated. He gestured to the house. This is the solution. Amber stepped closer to Robert, slipping her arm through his. We tried to make this as easy as possible for everyone. Robert's been under so much stress. I looked at this woman, this stranger wearing my future on her arm, and something broke inside me, not my spirit, not my strength, but the last remaining thread of denial, the final hope that this was somehow a misunderstanding. How long? I asked quietly. Robert blinked. What? How long have you been planning this? How long have you been with her? I pointed at Amber, who had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. Me, that's not relevant. How long? I wasn't quiet anymore. The neighbors were definitely watching now. Let them watch. Robert sighed like I was being unreasonable. Amber and I met 18 months ago at a sales conference. We've been together for a year. And before you make this into some dramatic betrayal, you and I have been going through the motions for years. You know it. I know it. A year. He'd been cheating for a year, planning this for who knows how long, and then waited until I was at my most vulnerable. Cut open, drugged, terrified, to steal my home. Where am I supposed to live? I asked. Robert, I just had major surgery. I can barely walk. Where am I supposed to go? He pulled out his wallet and handed me a business card. This is a women's shelter downtown. They have beds. I slapped the card out of his hand. Patricia caught my arm as my legs buckled. The pain from the surgery was nothing compared to the pain of this moment standing in my own driveway. Watching strangers carry away my life while my husband of 32 years suggested I go to a homeless shelter. You're not going to any shelter, Patricia said firmly. You're staying with me until we figure this out. Robert shrugged. Fine, whatever, but me, you need to be out of here by tomorrow. The new owners are nice people, young couple, first baby on the way, and they don't need this drama. That's when I noticed something that would change everything. The movers were carrying out a large portrait, the oil painting of my mother that she'd commissioned the year before she died. It was one of my most treasured possessions, worth at least $30,000, both sentimentally and financially. My mother had left it specifically to me in her will. Stop. I called to the movers. They looked at Robert for guidance, and he waved them on. Robert, that's my mother's portrait. It's mine, not community property. You have no right. Everything in this house is being sold or divided according to the divorce settlement you signed, Robert said flatly, including that painting. I didn't sign anything. My voice was hoarse from screaming, from crying, from disbelief. Robert, please, my mother's portrait. Please, he looked at me for a long moment and I saw a stranger. Not the man who'd spun me around our empty living room 2 years ago. Not the father who'd stayed up all night when market had croup, a stranger who had stolen my face to sign documents while I was drugged and helpless. The painting is worth money, me. Money we need to settle debts, be reasonable. Amber checked her expensive watch. Baby, we need to go. We have dinner reservations at 8, and you know how hard it is to get a table at Morty's. Baby. She called him baby while I stood there in sweatpants, still wearing my hospital bracelet, still oozing from surgical wounds. Robert kissed her cheek. You're right. Let's go. He turned back to me. Me. I left your clothes and personal items in the garage in trash bags. Take them today. The locks are being changed tomorrow morning at 9. And then he walked away, just walked away, got in the BMW with Amber, and drove off to his dinner reservation at Morty's while I stood in ruins of my life. Patricia helped me into her car. I don't remember the drive to her house. I remember sitting on her guest bed, staring at the wall, while she made phone calls and brought me tea. Couldn't drink, we're calling the police, she said. This is fraud, me, elder abuse, forgery. We're calling right now, but I was 64 years old, not elderly, and I had signed those papers even if I didn't remember it, and Robert had witnesses and power of attorney and a lawyer who'd made sure every I was dotted, every T crossed. The police came. They were sympathetic but clear. This was a civil matter, not criminal. If I believed the signature was forged or obtained under duress, I'd need to hire a lawyer and fight it in court. But the house sale was complete. The money was gone, split according to the settlement agreement I'd apparently signed. I had no access to a joint accounts which Robert had emptied the day before the surgery. How much was in there? I asked the officer, though I was afraid of the answer. He checked his notes. According to the bank statements, approximately $473,000. I felt my heart stop. What? Your husband withdrew it all on April 22nd. Legal, since it was a joint account. April 22nd, the day before my surgery, while I was planting impatiens and feeling the first cramping pains, Robert was at the bank stealing my future. That night, alone in Patricia's guest room, I took inventory of my life. I had 3 trash bags of clothes, most of which no longer fit my post-surgery body. I had my phone, my purse, and $87 in my checking account. I had no home, no car. Robert had taken our only vehicle, said it was his according to the settlement, no access to our savings, no retirement account. Robert had somehow gotten me to sign away my portion. I had mounting medical bills that would drown me, and I had a body that couldn't work, couldn't lift anything over 5 pounds, couldn't even walk around the block without stopping to rest. I had lost everything in 3 weeks, but what I didn't know yet, what Robert and Amber and that slick lawyer had no idea about, was that I hadn't lost the one thing that mattered most, my mind, and I was about to use it in ways they never saw coming. Looking back now, I see that moment as my turning point, not the betrayal, not the discovery, but that quiet moment in Patricia's guest room, sitting on a borrowed bed in borrowed pajamas, when I decided that I wasn't done fighting. Not by a long shot. The next morning, I asked Patricia to drive me back to my house, my former house, one more time before the locks were changed. I needed to see it. I needed to say goodbye, or so I told her. What I really needed was to look through those trash bags Robert had left in the garage. Patricia parked in the driveway at 8:30 in the morning. The moving van was gone. The house looked naked, violated, but the garage was still open, and inside were 4 large black trash bags. I went through them methodically, though every movement pulled at my incisions, clothes, toiletries, photo albums. At least Robert had given me those, and then at the bottom of the 3rd bag, I found what I didn't know I was looking for, my old planner from last year. I used to keep detailed planners, every appointment and note written in my small, careful handwriting. I'd stopped when I transitioned to a digital calendar on my phone, but this planner covered January through December of last year, and I'd kept it out of habit. And there, in March of last year, 13 months ago, was a note I'd written. Robert meeting with Stan Kessler about retirement planning. 10 a.m. Friday. Stan Kessler was a financial advisor Robert had used for years. Why would they be meeting about retirement planning more than a year ago? We were both still 5 years from retirement, unless Patricia, I said slowly, an idea forming. Do you remember when Robert went on that long trip to Florida last March? Said it was a big medical conference. Patricia was helping me fold clothes back into the bags, vaguely. You were upset because it was over your birthday. It was a week-long trip. He sent me a picture from the conference. So I remember because he was standing in front of a banner for some pharmaceutical company. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and scrolled back through old photos there. Robert in a hotel ballroom, smiling, the banner behind him clearly showing the conference name and dates. I zoomed in on the photo. The banner said the conference was March 15-17. 3 days, but Robert had been gone March 13-20. 8 days. Where had he been for the other 5 days? I opened Facebook on my phone and looked up Amber's profile. The name Robert had introduced her as her privacy settings were loose, probably because she was one of those people who overshared everything. I scrolled back through her posts to March of last year, and there it was, a photo posted. On March 18, 1 year ago, Amber on a beach, sunset behind her, caption reading, "Best vacation ever with my love." And in the reflection of her sunglasses, if you zoomed in close enough, you could just barely make out a man's silhouette. The timeline was falling into place. Robert had been planning this for over a year, maybe longer. Patricia drove me to the public library, where I could use a computer and printer for free. My hands were steadier now, my mind sharp despite the pain medication. I was thinking clearly for the first time since the surgery. I printed out Amber's Facebook post. I printed out my old planner entry. I printed out bank statements. I could access online statements showing the slow, steady withdrawal of money from our savings over the past 14 months. 2,000 here, 5,000 there. Nothing large enough to trigger alerts, but it added up to almost $90,000 before the final big withdrawal. Where had that money gone? I called our bank and asked to speak with a manager. I explained my situation, recent surgery, surprise divorce, need to understand the account history. The manager was sympathetic but firm without Robert's permission. She couldn't give me information about accounts I was no longer on. What if I file a formal complaint about potential fraud? I asked. She paused. Then we'd have to investigate, but that process can take 60 to 90 days, and if the withdrawals were made by an authorized account holder, dead end. I thanked her and hung up, but I wasn't done, not even close. That afternoon, while Patricia was at work, I sat on her couch with my laptop and did something I'd never done before. I hired a private investigator. His name was James Chen, and his website showed 30 years of experience in infidelity cases, asset searches, and fraud investigation. His fees were high, $250 per hour, but Patricia had quietly pressed $5,000 in cash into my hands that morning, money she'd been saving for a new roof. "You'll pay me back when this is over," she'd said firmly. "Right now, you need ammunition." I called James and explained everything. The hospital, the signature, the house sale, the girlfriend, the missing money. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Mrs. Harrison," he finally said, "I've been doing this for 3 decades, and your story has more red flags than a communist parade. Give me a week. I'll find out what your husband's been up to." "I don't have much money," I admitted. "First 3 days are on me," he said. "I hate bullies, and lady, your husband is a world-class bully. While James did his work, I did mine." I requested my medical records from the hospital, specifically from day 8, the day Robert claimed I'd signed the divorce papers. The records showed I'd been on morphine every 2 hours, had a fever of 102, and was documented as confused and disoriented by the nursing staff. One nurse had written, "Patient unable to remember daughter's name when asked, calling for her mother, who passed in 2019. I'd been out of my mind." And Robert's lawyer had come anyway, put papers in front of me, and claimed I was lucid enough to sign away my life. I got the name of the lawyer from the divorce paperwork. Theodore Baines from the firm Baines and Associates. I looked him up, 50, 8 years old. Decent reputation, but there were a few complaints filed with the State Bar Association, nothing serious enough to cost him his license, but enough to show a pattern of aggressive tactics. I called his office. I'd like to speak with Mr. Baines about the Harrison divorce case. I said calmly when his receptionist answered. Are you a party to the case? I'm me, Harrison. My husband retained Mr. Baines. Oh, a pause. Mrs. Harrison, Mr. Baines represented your husband, so he can't speak with you directly. You'd need your own attorney. I don't have an attorney. I don't have money for an attorney, but I do have medical records proving I wasn't competent to sign anything on April 21st, and I have witnesses who will testify to that, so you can either put Mr. Baines on the phone, or I can take those records to the State Bar Association and the local news station. Your choice. Another pause. Please hold. Theodore Baines had a slick voice, the kind that probably charmed juries and intimidated opponents. Mrs. Harrison, I'm sorry for your difficult situation, but everything was handled by the book. You signed the papers. I have witnesses. This is. I was on morphine. I was documented as confused, and you knew it. I documented that you appeared alert and responsive. Mr. Baines, I want to know who paid you, not just the retainer. I want to know if there's anyone else involved in this, because a straightforward divorce doesn't require sneaking into a hospital room and getting a drugged woman's signature. That requires planning, conspiracy. He was quiet. When he spoke again, the slick charm was gone. Mrs. Harrison, I strongly suggest you get an attorney and file any complaints through proper channels. I'm hanging up now. And he did. But I'd heard something in his voice, nervousness. I'd rattled him. Good. 5 days after my discharge, James Chen called. Mrs. Harrison, are you sitting down? I was lying on Patricia's couch, icing my incisions, staring at the ceiling and wondering how to afford my next round of prescriptions. Yes, your husband has been planning this for 18 months. He met Amber Strickland at a conference in Miami in March 2 years ago. They've been in a relationship since March of last year. And here's the kicker, she's not just his girlfriend. She's his business partner. What? Robert started a second company 16 months ago. Medical supply distribution, registered in Delaware. Amber Strickland is listed as co-owner and CFO. The company is called Harrison Solutions, LLC. My maiden name is Harrison. He'd used my name for his company with his mistress. James continued, the $90,000 he withdrew over the past year, it went into capitalizing that company. The final $473,000 from your joint account. Same place he liquidated your entire marital savings to fund his new business with his girlfriend. Can I get it back? Maybe, if you can prove he misappropriated marital funds without your consent. But here's the problem. According to the divorce settlement you signed, that I was drugged into signing. According to that settlement, you waived all claims to any business interests Robert developed during the marriage, which means Harrison Solutions LLC is legally his, even though it was funded with your money. I closed my eyes. He planned this perfectly. Not quite, James said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Robert made 3 big mistakes. First, he committed fraud to get your signature. Second, he used marital assets to fund a business during the marriage, before the divorce was filed. And third, he pissed off a woman who's smarter than he ever gave her credit for. James sent me his full report the next day. 47 pages of bank records, business filings, text messages he'd somehow obtained between Robert and Amber, photos of them together dating back over a year, and a timeline that showed calculated deception. But the most damning piece was a text message from Robert to Amber dated April 15, 8 days before my surgery. Robert, surgery is scheduled for the 23rd. I'll move money out the day before. Papers drafted. Amber, Ted has them ready. You sure she'll be drugged enough to sign? Robert, she'll be on morphine, won't remember a thing. It's perfect timing. They'd planned it. They'd waited for me to be vulnerable, medically compromised, and they'd struck with precision. I sat with that text message for a long time, reading it over and over. The coldness of it, the calculation, the cruelty, and then I called the one person who could help me, my cousin Leonard. Leonard was a lawyer, not just any lawyer, but the kind who'd built a career on taking down corporations and bullies. He was retired now, living in Arizona, but we'd stayed close over the years. I'd attended his daughter's wedding. He'd driven 12 hours for my mother's funeral. He said when he answered, "I heard about Robert. I'm so sorry. What can I do? I need you to destroy him." I said calmly. "Legally, thoroughly, completely. I need him to lose everything he stole from me, plus damages, plus whatever else we can get. Can you do that?" Leonard was quiet for a moment. "Send me everything you have. I'll catch a flight tomorrow." Little did they know, I was 3 steps ahead. While Robert and Amber celebrated their successful heist, and yes, James confirmed they'd gone to the Bahamas for a week to celebrate, posting photos all over social media, Leonard and I built a case. We filed an emergency motion to freeze Robert's assets, including Harrison Solutions LLC. We filed a fraud complaint with the state attorney general. We filed a formal complaint against Theodore Baines with the state bar. We contacted the hospital administration about their staff allowing a lawyer to obtain a signature from a clearly incompetent patient. And we filed a lawsuit for fraud, elder abuse, conversion of assets, and breach of fiduciary duty. The trick, Leonard explained as we worked through strategy, is that Robert thinks he's won. He thinks you're defeated, broke, and too traumatized to fight back. That's his weakness. He's not protecting himself because he doesn't think he needs to. We scheduled a mandatory mediation for exactly 2 weeks after I found James's report. Robert would have to attend. He'd have to face me across a conference table, and he'd have to face Leonard. In the meantime, I did something else, something that would matter later. I called Marcus, my son. Marcus was 41, lived in Seattle, and had been distant for years, not estranged exactly, but busy with his own life, his own family. He called on holidays and birthdays, but we weren't close anymore, not like when he was young. I'd always assumed that was natural, part of children growing up in a way. When I told him everything that had happened, the surgery, the betrayal, the stolen house, the girlfriend, he was silent for a long time. "Mom," he finally said, his voice thick, "why didn't you call me sooner? You're busy, sweetheart. I didn't want to burden. I'm your son." He was crying now. "I should have been there. I should have protected you from him. God, Mom, I'm so sorry." "There's nothing for you to be sorry for. But Marcus, I need to ask you something. Has your father contacted you in the past month?" "Yeah, actually. He called right after your surgery. Said you guys were getting divorced, that it was mutual, that you'd agreed to split everything 50-50. He made it sound friendly, like a conscious uncoupling, or whatever they call it. Did he ask you for anything?" A pause. "He said he was having temporary cash flow problems and asked if I could loan him $20,000. I said no. Things are tight here too. But he made it seem like it was because of the divorce. Like he was trying to be fair to you, and it was leaving him short." I closed my eyes. "He stole nearly $500,000 from me, Marcus. There are no cash flow problems. He's spending it on his girlfriend. That son of a bitch." Marcus's voice was cold. "Mom, I'm coming home. I'm getting on a plane tomorrow. You're not facing this alone." The mediation was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Thursday, exactly 19 days after Robert had left me in our driveway with 3 trash bags and a business card for a homeless shelter. Leonard had prepared me carefully. "Don't show emotion," he coached. "Don't cry, don't yell. Be calm, dignified, strong. Make him think you've accepted defeat and just want to negotiate a fair settlement. Can you do that?" I thought about 32 years of marriage. I thought about standing in that hospital room, terrified I was dying, while Robert was at the bank stealing my future. I thought about Amber wearing her designer heels on my front porch, calling my husband baby. I can do that, I said. The mediation was held in a conference room in a downtown office building. Leonard and I arrived early. I was dressed carefully, not fancy, but put together. Navy slacks, a white blouse, minimal makeup. I wanted to look like a woman who was healing, surviving, deserving of sympathy. Robert arrived at 2:03 p.m. with Theodore Baines and Amber Strickland. Amber, he'd brought his girlfriend to our divorce mediation. I watched Robert's face when he saw Leonard sitting next to me. Watched the flicker of surprise, then concern, then the attempt to mask it with confidence. Leonard, Robert said with a nod, didn't know you were practicing law again. For me, I came out of retirement. Leonard said pleasantly, shall we begin? The mediator was a woman in her 60s named Susan Gregory, known for fairness and efficiency. She outlined the process, the goals, the rules. Robert looked bored, checking his phone under the table. Amber held his hand, her expensive nails catching the fluorescent light. Let's start with the current situation, Susan said, reading from her notes. Mrs. Harrison, you're claiming that the divorce settlement was obtained through fraud and that you are not competent to sign due to medication and medical condition. Is that correct? Yes. I said quietly, and Mr. Harrison, you maintain that all procedures were followed correctly and that Mrs. Harrison was competent when she signed. Absolutely, Robert said. Look, I understand Mee is upset about the divorce, but she's trying to retroactively claim incompetence because she doesn't like the outcome. That's not how this works. Leonard opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. May I present evidence? For the next 45 minutes, Leonard methodically laid out the case. The medical records showing my morphine dosing and documented confusion. The text messages between Robert and Amber planning the timing. The bank records showing systematic asset stripping. The business filings for Harrison Solutions LLC, funded entirely with marital assets. The timeline proving premeditation. I watched Robert's face change. Watched the confidence drain away. Watched Theodore Baines start to sweat. Mr. Baines, Leonard said pleasantly when you visited Mrs. Harrison in the hospital on April 21st. Did you review her medical chart before obtaining her signature? Aye. The nurse said she was alert. Theodore stammered. Leonard pulled out another document. This is an affidavit from that nurse. She states that she was pressured by you to allow the visit despite Mrs. Harrison being in no condition to conduct legal business. She also states that you specifically requested she not document the visit in the medical records. Would you like to comment on that? Theodore said nothing. And Mr. Harrison, Leonard continued, turning to Robert, when did you first meet Amber Strickland? I don't see how that's relevant. Please answer the question. About 2 years ago at a conference, Leonard pulled out printed copies of Amber's Facebook posts, the photos of them together dating back 18 months. And when did your romantic relationship begin? Robert glanced at Amber. About a year ago. Actually, according to these text messages, Leonard laid out page after page. You were romantically involved at least 18 months ago, during which time you systematically removed money from your joint marital accounts to fund a business with MS. Strickland, didn't you? That money was mine. It was marital property, and you used it without your wife's knowledge or consent during the marriage, then fraudulently obtained her signature while she was medically incapacitated to ratify. Theft after the fact. The room was silent except for the air conditioning humming. Susan, the mediator, looked at Theodore. Mr. Baines, I'm recommending this case be referred to the district attorney's office for criminal investigation. What happened here isn't just a civil matter. Theodore's face went gray. Robert stood abruptly. This is bullshit. Mee, you're blowing this out of proportion. We can settle this reasonably. Sit down, Mr. Harrison, Leonard said, his voice sharp now. We're not finished. Leonard pulled out one more document. This morning, A judge granted our emergency motion to freeze all assets associated with Harrison Solutions LLC, all of Mr. Harrison's personal accounts, and the proceeds from the house sale. Additionally, the sale of the marital home is being investigated for fraud, which may result in the transaction being voided and the property returned to Mrs. Harrison's ownership. You can't. Robert sputtered, I can and I did. You spent 32 years underestimating your wife, Robert. Bad strategy. Amber stood up, her chair scraping loudly. Robert, let's go. We don't need to listen to this. Ms. Strickland. Leonard said, you should know that you're named as a defendant in our lawsuit. As a knowing participant in fraud and conversion of marital assets, you're equally liable for damages. I'd suggest you find your own attorney. She looked at Robert, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Doubt, calculation. The look of someone realizing she'd hitched her wagon to a sinking ship. The mediation ended with no settlement. Robert and Amber left quickly, Theodore trailing behind looking shocked. Leonard and I stayed, going over next steps with Susan. This is one of the clearest cases of fraud I've seen, Susan said quietly. Mrs. Harrison, I'm very sorry for what you've experienced. I'll be filing my recommendations with the court tomorrow. Outside, in the parking lot, I finally let myself breathe, really breathe. Marcus was waiting by Leonard's car. He'd flown in the night before and had been ready to come into the mediation if needed. How'd it go? He asked, hugging me carefully around my still. Healing incisions. We're going to win. I said, and I knew it was true. The legal process took 4 months, 4 long months of depositions, motions, investigations. But when it was done, the judge's ruling was comprehensive and brutal. The divorce settlement was voided due to fraud and incompetence. Every signature I'd made in that hospital room was thrown out. The house sale was reversed. The young couple got their money back, and the house returned to my name. Robert was ordered to return every penny of the marital assets, plus interest, plus damages for fraud and emotional distress. Harrison Solutions LLC was dissolved, its assets liquidated and split as marital property. Theodore Baines was suspended from practicing law for 18 months and ordered to pay a $50,000 fine. And Robert was charged with fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. The criminal charges were eventually pleaded down to fraud, with Robert receiving 2 years probation, community service, and a permanent mark on his record. But the financial judgment was ironclad. He owed me $897,000. He didn't have it. Amber left him before the judgment came down. Leonard was right. She was looking out for herself first. Robert had to declare bankruptcy, lost his business, lost his car, had to move into a studio apartment, and take a job working retail at a medical supply store, the same stores he used to manage. Me, I moved back into my house. Patricia helped me repaint, replace the carpets, make it mine again. Marcus visited more often, bringing my grandkids. They planted new flowers with me in the garden. The medical bills were covered by the judgment. I paid Patricia back her $5,000 plus interest, though she tried to refuse. I paid Leonard, though he charged me a fraction of his usual rates. And I put the rest into accounts Robert couldn't touch, with my name only. I'm 65 now, a year older, a lifetime wiser. My body healed, the scars are still there, thin white lines across my abdomen, but they don't hurt anymore. My heart healed slower, but it healed too. Not because I forgave Robert, I haven't, maybe I never will, but because I learned that healing isn't about forgiveness. It's about justice, dignity, and knowing your worth. I see Robert occasionally. This town isn't that big. He looks older now, worn down. Last time I saw him at the grocery store, he started to say something, then stopped. I nodded politely and walked past. There was nothing left to say. Amber moved to Chicago, according to Patricia's spy network of neighbors and Facebook stalkers. She's dating a financial advisor, apparently. I hope he has a prenup. Sometimes people ask me how I found the strength to fight back. They say, "Me, you were so sick, so betrayed. How did you not give up?" Here's what I learned, and I want you to hear this clearly if you're going through something similar. Silence doesn't mean weakness. All those years I was the quiet one, the accommodating one, the one who kept peace and avoided conflict. Robert thought that meant I was weak. He thought he could steal my life because I wouldn't fight back. He was wrong. Silence can be strength gathering itself, patience waiting for the right moment, strategy forming beneath a calm surface. You are not defined by what is done to you. You are defined by what you do next. When I was sitting in Patricia's guest room with 3 trash bags and $87, I could have given up. I could have accepted Robert's version of reality, that I was old, used up, defeated, but I didn't. Because I knew something he'd forgotten. I was the one who'd held our family together for 3 decades. I was the one who'd balanced budgets, raised children, tended relationships, and kept everything running. That strength didn't disappear because he betrayed me. It multiplied. If you're in a situation where someone has abused your trust, stolen from you, or hurt you while you were vulnerable, please know you are not powerless. It might feel like it. You might be broke, sick, scared, or alone, but you have more power than you know. Document everything. Keep records, take photos, save text messages. Write things down while your memory is fresh. Evidence is power. Find your people. I had Patricia, Leonard, Marcus, James, Chen. You need people who believe you, who won't gaslight you or tell you to keep the peace. Build your army, even if it's just 2 people. Use the systems available, legal aid societies, women's shelters, state bar associations, district attorneys, elder abuse hotlines. These systems exist for a reason. Use them, and most importantly, don't let anyone tell you that fighting back makes you bitter, vindictive, or unforgiving. Justice isn't revenge. Justice is restoring balance. Justice is saying, "You cannot do this to me." Justice is making sure they face consequences, so they think twice before doing it to someone else. I still live in my house. I still tend my garden. The tulips are beautiful this year, and I planted new roses last fall. Pink ones, my favorite. I volunteer at the library twice a week. I've started painting again, something I gave up decades ago. I take long walks in the evening, and my body is strong again, healed and capable. I'm dating someone, actually. His name is Paul. He's a retired teacher, and he makes me laugh. We take it slow. I'm not sure I'll ever marry again, and he understands that. But it's nice to have companionship, conversation, someone who sees me as me, not as Robert's victim. The house is mine, the money is mine, the life I'm building is mine, and nobody, not Robert, not Amber, not anyone, can take that from me again. One last thing I want to tell you. About 6 months after everything was settled, I got a letter from the young couple who'd bought my house, the ones whose sale was reversed. I was worried they'd be angry, or that they'd lost money, or that I'd ruined their dreams. The letter said, "Dear Mrs. Harrison, we want you to know that we found a better house in a better neighborhood for less money. The sale falling through was actually a blessing. But more than that, we want you to know that we're grateful you fought for what was right. We have a daughter now, and someday we'll tell her about the brave woman who wouldn't let anyone steal her home. Thank you for showing us what strength looks like. We hope you're well and happy." I cried when I read that letter. Good tears, healing tears. I keep it in my mother's antique sideboard, the one the movers were carrying out, the one I got back. It reminds me that fighting for justice doesn't just help you, it sends ripples into the world, so that's my story. The story of how my husband sold our house while I was in the hospital, and what happened when I decided to fight back. Was it worth it every single day? Every lawyer's meeting, every painful moment of testimony, every time I had to relive the betrayal worth it? Because I didn't just win my house back, I won myself back. Robert took my trust, my money, and my home. But he didn't take my strength, my intelligence, or my dignity. Those were mine all along. I just had to remember they were there. If you're listening to this and you're facing your own betrayal, your own impossible situation, please remember, you are stronger than you think. You deserve justice, you deserve to fight back, and you deserve to win. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, or if you faced something similar, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Sometimes just knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. Remember, every story has a lesson, and yours might just be beginning. Don't give up, don't let them win, and don't ever, ever let anyone make you feel small. My name is me, and this is what happened when someone underestimated me.